Picture this for a second, a 12-year-old boy who has never won a single fight against a real enemy shinobi, walking straight into the mist toward a man who kills for a living. If you know Naruto Uzumaki even a little, you already know he wouldn't have it any other way. But what you don't know, what nobody in this story knows yet, not even Naruto himself, is that today, on a quiet dirt road just outside the land of waves, something buried in his blood for 12 years is about to wake up. Stick around, because by the end of this chapter, the Naruto you thought you knew is going to look a lot different. The road out of Konoha was long and dusty, and Tazuna the bridge builder had been silent for most of it, silent in the particular way of a man who's hiding something he doesn't want to say out loud. Naruto didn't notice. He was too busy walking backward in front of the group, arms crossed behind his head, grinning like he'd already saved the land of waves single-handedly. You know, Naruto announced to nobody in particular, I bet this is gonna be easy. Bridge builder, escort mission, boring stuff. I could do this in my sleep. You're already annoying while awake, Sakura muttered, not even looking up. Try not to embarrass us. Sasuke said nothing. He rarely did. He walked a few paces behind Kakashi with his hands in his pockets, and his dark eyes fixed somewhere past the horizon, the way he always looked when he was pretending not to care about something he actually cared about a great deal. Kakashi, meanwhile, was reading, as usual, that same orange book he never seemed to put down, one lazy eye scanning the pages while the other, somehow, still tracked every twitch of movement on the road ahead. If you've watched enough of these stories, you know that's the tell. That's the moment right before everything changes. And sure enough, there it was. A puddle. Nothing unusual about a puddle, right? Except it hadn't rained in Konoha or on this road for days. Kakashi's eye flicked toward it for exactly half a second before returning to his book, and if you blinked, you'd have missed the way his grip on the spine tightened. The two shinobi that erupted from that puddle a moment later moved fast. Faster than Naruto had ever seen anyone move in real life. Chains, mundane, ordinary steel chains, the kind any shinobi could carry, whipped out and wrapped around Kakashi in an instant, and then, with a sound like tearing paper, they pulled tight. Kakashi came apart, shredded into pieces like wet parchment. For one full second, nobody breathed. Then the world came back into focus, and the two attackers, the demon brothers, though nobody had introduced themselves yet, turned their masked faces toward the genin standing frozen in the road. One down, one of them rasped. Kill the bridge builder. The kids are a bonus. Naruto's mind was doing that thing minds do in real danger, where every thought arrives a half-second too slow. He watched Sasuke move first, a kunai flashing, pinning one attacker's chain to a tree with a speed that made Naruto's stomach twist with something that wasn't quite jealousy and wasn't quite admiration, either. He watched Sakura shove herself in front of Tazuna, shaking but standing her ground. And he watched the second attacker come straight for him. He didn't move. Couldn't. His feet felt bolted to the dirt, and somewhere in the back of his skull a small, ugly voice was already whispering that he wasn't going to be fast enough, wasn't going to be strong enough, wasn't going to be enough. A clawed gauntlet caught him across the back of the hand as he finally threw himself sideways too late, and pain lit up his arm like a struck match. He hit the ground hard, clutching his bleeding hand to his chest, and for one humiliating moment all he could do was stare up at the masked shinobi standing over him and think, this is it. This is really it. That's when Kakashi, very much not in pieces, stepped out from the trees behind the attacker and ended it in about 2 seconds flat. If you're new to this story, that's your first lesson about Kakashi Hatake. The thing he shreds into paper isn't him. It's never him. It's a substitution, every single time, and if you forget that, it'll get you killed. With both demon brothers restrained, Kakashi crouched down in front of Naruto, checking the shallow claw marks on his hand with an expression that gave away nothing and everything at the same time. You didn't move, Kakashi said quietly. Not cruel. Just true. I was gonna, Naruto started, and then stopped, because there was no good end to that sentence. The poison on those claws is slow-acting, Kakashi said, wrapping the cut with practiced hands. You'll be fine physically. But I need you to understand something, all three of you. He looked up, and for once his tone dropped every trace of laziness. This was a real fight. Real shinobi, sent to kill. Tazuna, I think it's time you told us the truth about this mission. And so, sitting on the roadside with Naruto's hand freshly bandaged, Tazuna finally admitted what he'd been hiding. The bridge he was building threatened to break the stranglehold a tyrant named Gato held over the land of waves, and Gato wanted him dead badly enough to hire Missing Nin to do it. This was never the simple C-rank escort they'd been told. It was a job for shinobi far above their level. Kakashi could have turned back. Every rule in the book said he should have. But when he looked at his 3 genin, at Sasuke's clenched jaw, Sakura's trembling but stubborn stance, and Naruto staring down at his own bandaged hand like he was furious at it, he made the call that would change all of their lives. We continued, Kakashi said. But from here on, stay alert. That was a warning shot. Whoever sent them isn't finished. If Naruto had known just how right that sentence would turn out to be, maybe he wouldn't have spent the boat crossing quite so quiet. The boat ride into the land of waves happened in near silence, the boatmen cutting the engine and paddling by hand as fog rolled in thick around them, swallowing the shoreline whole. Tazuna's home country didn't look like the map made it seem. It looked like a place slowly drowning, gray water and grayer sky pressing in from every side, fishing boats abandoned and rotting along the docks they passed. Naruto sat at the bow with his bandaged hand curled in his lap, staring at his own reflection in the black water and hating what he saw there. He kept replaying it. The moment his feet wouldn't move, the moment Sasuke acted, and he just stood there like a statue. It gnawed at him worse than the shallow cut ever could. Some future Hokage, the voice in his head sneered. You froze. You actually froze. You're quiet, Sakura said from beside him, voice low so it wouldn't carry across the water. That's new. I'm always quiet when I'm thinking of something awesome to do, Naruto shot back automatically, though there wasn't much heat in it. Sakura studied him for a second longer than usual, like she wanted to say something real, but the boatman cut in before she could. Almost there, he whispered. Keep it down from here. Gato's men patrol these waters. And then, out of the mist ahead, it appeared, the half-finished skeleton of the Great Naruto Bridge, though of course nobody called it that yet, its unfinished beams jutting out of the water like the ribs of some enormous drowned animal. Even Naruto, jittery as he was, felt something settle in his chest at the sight of it. This was what they were protecting. This was real. They docked without incident, made their way through waves run-down streets and finally to Tazuna's modest home, where his daughter Tsunami, dressed simply, sleeves long against the coastal chill, hair tied back for cooking, greeted them with tea and a spread of grilled fish and rice, and a boy named Inari who looked at all of them like they were already dead and just didn't know it yet. You shouldn't have come, Inari muttered, staring at his plate. Nobody can beat Gato. People who try just end up dead. Hey, Naruto snapped, some of his old fire flaring back up despite everything. Nobody asked you, kid. We're gonna protect this bridge, believe it? Inari didn't answer. He just got up and left the table, and something about the hollow look on his face stuck with Naruto long after the boy was gone. If you've ever wondered what turns a bright kid quiet and hard like that, Wave's story was about to show you exactly how. That night, lying on a thin mat on Tazuna's floor with Sasuke's steady breathing on one side and Sakura curled up on the other, Naruto stared at the ceiling and flexed his bandaged hands slowly in the dark. He thought about his promise to himself, the one he'd made 100 times since the day he graduated the academy. I'm going to become Hokage, believe it, no matter what. But promises are easy to make in daylight. It's the mist that tests them. 2 days passed with no sign of another attack, and Kakashi used every hour of it. Tree walking became the genin's new obsession. Chakra control exercises meant to teach them to stick to a tree trunk using nothing but focused chakra in their feet, no hands. Sasuke got it fastest, of course, though even he stumbled plenty at first. Sakura, surprisingly, had the best control of the three, her chakra reserve smaller but far more precisely tuned. Naruto, predictably, burned through the exercise like a wildfire through dry grass, overcorrecting, blasting bark clean off the tree, falling flat on his back more times than he wanted to count. You've got the biggest reserves I've ever seen in a genin, Kakashi told him after one particularly explosive attempt sent Naruto tumbling 20 feet down. The problem isn't power. It's control. You need to learn to feel it, not just throw it. Easy for you to say, Naruto grumbled, spitting out a mouthful of dirt. Little did any of them know just how literally that advice was about to apply. Kakashi kept training with them each day, watching Sasuke and Sakura's progress with quiet satisfaction, but he watched Naruto a little differently, a little longer, a little more thoughtfully, though he never said why. If you'd been able to read Kakashi's mind in those moments, you'd have seen him thinking back to a woman with fierce violet eyes and a temper that could level a training ground, wondering, just wondering, whether her son had inherited more from her than just the whiskers and the will of fire. He didn't say a word of it out loud. Not yet. Some secrets, Kakashi had learned, were better left buried until the moment forced them into the light. That moment came sooner than any of them expected. On the fourth morning, Kakashi took the team out to the half-built bridge to observe Tazuna's construction crew and get a feel for the terrain they'd be defending. The fog off the sea was thick that day, thicker than usual, curling low over the water like something alive. Naruto noticed it first. The way sound seemed to die in the mist. The way even the seabirds had gone silent. Something's wrong, Kakashi said quietly. And that single sentence was enough to snap every genin's spine straight. A massive blade came spinning out of the fog a heartbeat later, so large it looked more like a slab of a demolished building than a sword, and it would have taken Kakashi's head clean off his shoulders if he hadn't ducked at exactly the right instant. The blade buried itself in a tree trunk with a sound like a thunderclap, quivering there, and a figure dropped onto its hilt from out of the mist as casually as a man stepping off a train. He was enormous. Bandages wrapped the lower half of his face, and above them, eyes as flat and merciless as a shark's fixed on Kakashi without so much as glancing at the genin. Well, well, the man said, voice rough as gravel. Sharingan Kakashi. Copy ninja of the leaf. Guess the rumors about Tazuna hiring real muscle weren't wrong. Zabuza Momochi, Kakashi said, and something in his tone made Sasuke and Sakura go rigid. Demon of the Hidden Mist. If you don't already know the name, let this chapter be your introduction. Zabuza Momochi was one of the most feared missing nin to ever leave Kirigakure, a man who had passed the Hidden Mist's brutal graduation exam by killing his own classmates before he'd even become a genin. He was not the kind of enemy a squad of fresh genin were built to survive. Get Tazuna behind you and stay out of this fight, Kakashi ordered, voice iron flat, already reaching up to push his forehead protector off his left eye. Beneath it, a red iris spun to life, the Sharingan, the legendary bloodline he'd copied and carried as his own. Zabuza's eyes narrowed slightly at the sight of it, and for one strange moment something like respect flickered across his scarred face. So it's true. The man who copied 1,000 jutsu. He rolled his shoulders, hefting his blade free of the tree with one hand like it weighed nothing at all. This should be interesting then. What followed was less a fight and more a demonstration of a gap in power so vast it made Naruto's stomach hurt just watching it. Zabuza vanished and reappeared, water clones splitting off from him mid-strike so fast the genin couldn't tell which one was real. Kakashi matched him blow for blow, Sharingan tracking every feint, but even he was clearly straining, sweat beating down his temple as he fought a man whose reputation, it turned out, hadn't been exaggerated one bit. Then the mist thickened, deliberately, unnaturally, swallowing the whole clearing hole until Naruto could barely see his own hand in front of his face. 8 points, Zabuza's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere at once, low and almost lazy. Larynx. Spine. Lungs. Liver. Jugular. Subclavian artery. Kidneys. Heart. Which one should I pick first, Kakashi? Sakura pressed close to Naruto's side, breathing hard, and even Sasuke, steady, controlled Sasuke, had gone pale. Don't worry, Kakashi's voice cut through the mist, calm despite everything. I won't let my comrades die. But mist this thick lies. It lies constantly, and it was about to lie in the worst way possible. A wall of water rose without warning from the nearby stream, curling upward into a massive sphere, and inside it, trapped, suspended, unable to so much as twitch a finger, was Kakashi. Water prison jutsu, Zabuza's voice rasped, stepping out from the mist now that his trap had closed, one arm buried wrist deep in the shimmering sphere to maintain the technique. A pity. He was strong. But a water prison can't be broken from the inside, and I can't move from here to finish the rest of you personally. He tilted his head, and even hidden behind the bandages, Naruto could hear the smirk in his voice. Good thing I brought a friend. A second Zabuza, a water clone, thick and heavy but not quite as solid as the real thing, peeled itself out of the mist and began walking calmly toward the three genin and the old bridge builder cowering behind them. Run, Kakashi's voice came, strained now, fighting the water sealing his lungs. Take Tazuna and run. That's an order. Nobody ran. Sasuke moved first, throwing himself forward with a speed that startled even the water clone, shuriken and kunai flashing in a combination that would have made any jonin proud. He landed hits, real hits, forcing the clone to actually work for its advance. Sakura stayed close to Tazuna, kunai shaking in her grip but her feet planted firm, refusing to fall back even though every instinct in her body was screaming at her to run. And Naruto froze. Not the same freeze as the road with the demon brothers. This was worse. This was the freeze of a boy watching his sensei, the first adult who had ever really, truly believed in him, trapped and dying in a bubble of water 20 feet away, watching his teammate throw himself at a monster 3 times his size, and feeling, with absolute crushing certainty, that there was nothing he could do about any of it. I froze on the road, the voice in his head snarled, louder now, uglier. I'm going to freeze here too. Kakashi-sensei's going to die because of me. Sasuke's going to die because of me. This is it. This is exactly what you are, nothing. Nobody. Useless. The water clone shrugged off Sasuke's last combo and sent him crashing into the dirt with a single contemptuous backhand. Sakura screamed his name. Tazuna stumbled backward, out of options, out of ground to retreat to. And Naruto, trembling, terrified, 12 years old and utterly out of his depth, watched the clone's shadow fall over his fallen teammate, and felt something inside him finally, catastrophically snap. It wasn't a decision. If you asked him later, he wouldn't be able to tell you he chose it. It happened the way a scream happens, the way your hand yanks back from a flame before your brain even registers the heat. 1 second Naruto was frozen solid with fear, and the next, something tore. Not his skin. Not exactly. It felt like a door he never knew existed had been kicked open somewhere behind his ribs, and out of that door came something that had been sleeping in his blood for 12 years, waiting, patiently, silently, for exactly this moment. Golden white chains erupted from his back in a blinding lattice, chakra given form and edge, whipping outward with a speed and violence that didn't feel like him at all, didn't feel controlled, didn't feel human, felt instead like something ancient answering a call it had been bred across generations to answer. Naruto barely had time to register the searing heat lancing through his back before the chains struck the water clone dead center, and the impact wasn't just physical. Something about the chains themselves, some property Naruto had no name for, and no memory of ever learning, ripped straight through the clone's chakra cohesion like they were made specifically to unmake it. The clone didn't just get knocked back. It came apart in midair, water splashing to the earth in a shapeless puddle, and for 1 full second, the entire clearing went dead silent. What? Zabuza said from inside the mist, and for the first time since he'd arrived, there was something in his voice that wasn't confidence. It was closer to disbelief, because it wasn't only the clone that had felt it. The moment those chains tore into existence, something in the water sphere holding Kakashi shuddered, the same suppressive, unraveling quality lashing outward through the ambient chakra in the clearing, disrupting the fine, constant control Zabuza needed to maintain his prison. It was small. It was only a fraction of a second's worth of instability. But a fraction of a second was all Kakashi Hatake needed. The water prison ruptured. Kakashi hit the ground in a crouch, gasping, already spinning to face Zabuza with murder in his one visible eye. But Zabuza was no longer looking at him at all. Zabuza was looking at Naruto, at the boy standing in the middle of the clearing, arms trembling, gold-white chains still hanging in the air around him like the afterimage of a lightning strike, dissolving slowly back into nothing even as he watched. Naruto's own eyes were wide with a shock that mirrored everyone else's in the clearing. He had no idea what had just happened, no idea where it had come from, no idea what he'd just done. All he knew was that his back burned like it had been split open, that his knees had gone weak as water, and that Sasuke, bruised, winded, but alive, was staring up at him from the dirt with an expression Naruto had genuinely never seen on his face before. Uzumaki, Zabuza said slowly, testing the word like it had a bad taste. Didn't think there were any of you left. Kakashi's head snapped toward him. You know what that was? I know what I saw, Zabuza growled, retreating a step back into the mist, blade lowering fractionally. Whatever calculations were happening behind those shark-flat eyes, they were clearly not finished, and clearly, they now included a variable he hadn't accounted for. Chains like that only ever belonged to one clan, and that clan's supposed to be dead. He didn't get the chance to say more. From somewhere high in the mist above, a masked figure descended without a sound and landed lightly between Zabuza and Kakashi, wielding a pair of saban needles with the kind of precision that made even Kakashi's Sharingan eye narrow warily. Forgive the interruption, the masked stranger said, voice smooth, almost gentle, utterly unreadable. But Zabuza-sama, your window is closing. Right. Zabuza's shark eyes lingered on Naruto for one final, unreadable second. We'll finish this another time, copy ninja. And you, the eyes flicked back to Naruto, and something almost like grim amusement colored his voice. Try not to die before I get the chance to figure out what you are. Mist swallowed them both whole, and in the space of a single breath, they were gone. Silence rushed back into the clearing like water filling a hole. For a moment nobody moved. Sakura was the first to scramble to Sasuke's side, hauling him upright with shaking hands, both of them staring across the clearing at Naruto like he'd grown a second head. Tazuna had gone pale as a sheet, gripping his own arm like he needed to remind himself he was still solid, still real. And Kakashi Hatake, who had faced down S-rank missing Nin without so much as raising his heart rate, stood frozen in the middle of the clearing, staring at Naruto with an expression none of his students had ever seen on him before. Not fear, exactly. Something closer to recognition, like he just watched a ghost walk across the battlefield wearing a 12-year-old's face. Naruto, he said quietly. Naruto opened his mouth to answer, to make some joke, some brag, anything to break the terrifying weight of everyone staring at him like that. But what came out instead was a strangled gasp as the pain in his back finally caught up with the adrenaline burning it out of his system. His legs buckled. The world tilted sideways, spinning up into gray, and the last thing he registered before the darkness swallowed him whole was Kakashi's voice, sharp with an urgency that had nothing to do with Zabuza anymore, shouting his name across a clearing gone suddenly, terrifyingly quiet. The walk back to Tazuna's house felt longer than it should have. Kakashi carried Naruto on his back the whole way, moving at a pace just short of a run, his visible eye scanning the tree line every few seconds out of pure habit even though Zabuza was long gone. Sasuke walked beside him in silence, one arm wrapped protectively around his ribs where the water clone had caught him, his dark eyes fixed on the unconscious boy slumped against their sensei's shoulders. Sakura brought up the rear with Tazuna, who hadn't said a single word since the mist cleared, his usually gruff face pale and thoughtful. Nobody spoke until they reached the house. Tsunami took one look at the group coming through the door, Naruto limp and unconscious, Sasuke favoring his side, Kakashi's jaw set tight, and didn't ask a single question. She simply cleared the low table, laid out a sleeping mat, and started boiling water, the way people do when a house has decided, without anyone announcing it, that today is going to be a long one. Lay him down here, she said quietly, and Kakashi did, easing Naruto onto the mat as gently as he could manage. Inari appeared in the doorway a moment later, drawn by the commotion, and went stiff at the sight of Naruto's still form. He's alive, Kakashi said. Chakra exhaustion, mostly. And some damage to his back that I need to look at. He glanced toward Tsunami. Do you have bandages? Clean water? Tsunami nodded and disappeared into the next room without a word, returning a moment later with a small basket of medical supplies and a kettle already starting to steam over the low fire. Inari lingered in the doorway a moment longer, staring at Naruto with an expression that was harder to read than his usual sullen mask, before retreating upstairs without another word. Kakashi knelt beside Naruto and carefully rolled him onto his side, peeling back the torn fabric of his jacket to check his back. Sasuke and Sakura crowded close despite themselves, and even Tazuna leaned in from where he'd sunk down onto a stool, curiosity winning out over the exhaustion clearly written across his face. What they found made even Kakashi go quiet for a moment. The skin across Naruto's shoulder blades wasn't torn or burned, the way you might expect from something exploding out of a person's back. Instead, faint reddish markings traced two neat lines down either side of his spine, already fading even as they watched, like brand marks left by something that had simply passed through rather than broken out. There was no blood, no wound at all, really, just those fading lines and the exhausted, too still way Naruto was breathing. That's... Sakura started, then stopped, clearly not sure what word she was even looking for. Not normal, Sasuke finished for her, flat and quiet. No, Kakashi agreed, running a careful, professional hand along the marks, feeling for anything beneath the skin his eye couldn't see. It's not. He was quiet for a long moment after that, and if you knew Kakashi Hatake at all, you'd know that silence from him was rarely empty. It was the silence of a man doing careful math in his head, weighing exactly how much to say and how much to keep locked away, a habit 20 years of secrets had carved into him whether he liked it or not. Sensei, Sakura said carefully, you know what that was. Don't you? Kakashi didn't answer right away. He reached for the bandages Tsunami had left, and began wrapping Naruto's back with quick, practiced efficiency, buying himself time the way he always did. Finally, without looking up, he said, I have a guess. I won't know for certain until he wakes up and we can ask him some questions. But... He paused, tying off the last bandage. If I'm right, it's something I didn't expect to see again in my lifetime. That's not an answer, Sasuke said, sharper than he probably meant to. Kakashi looked up at him then, and something in his single visible eye softened, not much, but enough. You're right. It's not. He sat back on his heels, glancing between the three genin, well, two conscious ones, and the exhausted third laid out on the mat between them. Let me finish making sure he's stable, and then I'll tell you what I know. All of it. You've earned that much today. That was enough to quiet the room, at least for the time being. Tsunami brought over a tray with warm cups of tea for everyone, plain and simple, steam curling up off the surface, setting them down without a word before retreating to check on Inari upstairs. Tazuna accepted his cup with both hands, wrapping his fingers around the warmth like it was the only steady thing left in a day that had gone sideways in every possible direction. They waited. It took almost 2 hours for Naruto to stir. He woke slowly, the way you do after your body has spent everything it has and is only grudgingly willing to give consciousness back. The first thing Naruto registered was the dull, deep ache running down both sides of his spine, like he'd been hit with something heavy and blunt in a place he couldn't quite reach to rub. The second thing was the ceiling of Tazuna's house, unfamiliar wooden beams swimming slowly into focus above him. The third thing was Sasuke's face, hovering closer than Naruto's brain was prepared to process, staring down at him with an expression Naruto had genuinely never seen his rival wear before. It took him a second to place it. Concern. Actual, unguarded concern. Why are you staring at me like that? Naruto mumbled, voice thick with sleep. It's creepy. Something in Sasuke's shoulders loosened all at once, and he sat back with a scoff that didn't quite land the way his scoffs usually did. You've been out for 2 hours, idiot. We weren't sure you were going to wake up at all. That got Naruto's attention. He pushed himself upright too fast, hissed at the pain that lanced down his back, and only then noticed the bandages wrapped around his torso, the tension in the room. The way every single person present, Sakura, Sasuke, Tazuna, and Kakashi standing near the doorway with his arms crossed, was watching him like he was about to do something unpredictable. What happened? Naruto asked slowly. Last thing I remember is, the clone was gonna hit Sasuke, and I... He trailed off, brow furrowing hard, chasing a memory that felt like trying to grab smoke. I don't actually remember. There was this feeling, like something ripping, and then everything just, it's fuzzy. You don't remember any of it? Sakura asked, leaning forward. Naruto, you had chains. Actual chains, made of chakra, coming out of your back. You destroyed a water clone with them and you broke Zabuza's hold on Kakashi-sensei's prison at the same time. Naruto blinked at her like she'd started speaking a different language. I did what? You heard her, Sasuke said. It wasn't a genjutsu. We all saw it. Naruto looked down at his own hands like they might still be glowing, like there might be some visible proof of what everyone was describing, But there was nothing there, just his familiar, ordinary hands, faintly trembling from chakra exhaustion. He looked up at Kakashi, and for once in his life, there wasn't a joke ready on his tongue, wasn't a boast, wasn't anything except pure, uncertain confusion. "Kakashi-sensei," he said quietly. "What's happening to me?" Kakashi pushed off from the doorway and crossed the room, lowering himself down to sit across from Naruto, the way a teacher sits when he's about to say something a student needs to actually hear, not just listen to. Sasuke and Sakura settled on either side, and even Tazuna leaned in from his stool, forgotten cup of tea cooling in his hands. "What you did out there," Kakashi said slowly, "has a name. It's called the Adamantine Sealing Chains. And it isn't something you learned, or copied, or picked up by accident." He paused, choosing his next words with obvious care. "It's a Kekkai Genkai. A bloodline technique. Which means it isn't something you do, Naruto. It's something you are." Naruto stared at him. "A bloodline? Like Sasuke's Sharingan?" "Similar principle, very different technique," Kakashi said. "The Sharingan comes from the Uchiha clan. What you manifested today belongs to a different clan entirely, one that isn't from Konoha originally, though its last known survivors settled here a long time ago." He held Naruto's gaze steadily. "The Uzumaki clan." The room went very quiet. "Uzumaki," Naruto repeated slowly, like he was testing the word for the first time in his life, even though, of course, it was his own name. That's my name." "I know," Kakashi said simply. "If you've never had a moment like that, hearing your own name explained to you like it's a mystery you somehow weren't part of, it's hard to describe what crossed Naruto's face in that instant. It wasn't shock, exactly. Shock is what you feel about something outside yourself. This was something closer to vertigo, the strange dizzy feeling of realizing the ground you've been standing on your entire life was never quite where you thought it was. I always figured." Naruto started, then stopped, swallowed, tried again. "I never really thought about my last name much. Nobody ever told me anything about it. I figured it was just a name. Just mine. I didn't know it meant anything." "It means quite a lot, actually," Kakashi said, and something in his voice had gone gentler now, careful in a way that made Sakura and Sasuke both go still and quiet, sensing that whatever came next mattered more than anything either of them had heard their sensei say before. The Uzumaki clan was famous, once, not for the chains alone. Those were rare even among Uzumaki, a trait that didn't appear in every member. They were famous for their extraordinary chakra. Massive reserves, incredible vitality, and a talent for sealing techniques that few clans in the shinobi world could match. They were close allies of Konoha, once. So close that the swirl on every leaf shinobi's flak jacket is actually an old symbol of their clan, worn in their honor. Naruto looked down at his own jacket almost involuntarily, though he wasn't wearing the standard flak vest yet, but Sakura was, and she glanced down at the small red spiral on her own back with an expression of dawning realization. "So, where are they now?" Sasuke asked. "The rest of the clan. If they were that strong, why haven't I ever heard of them?" Kakashi's expression shifted, just slightly, into something heavier. "Because they were destroyed. A long time ago, in the war before the last one, several villages that feared the Uzumaki's strength allied together, and wiped out their home, a place called Yuzushiogakure, the hidden whirlpool village. Most of the clan died that day. The survivors scattered, and over the years, most of what remained of the bloodline faded out of the world entirely." He paused. "As far as most people know, there are no full-blooded Uzumaki left anywhere. Which is part of why what happened today is going to be difficult to keep quiet. But Naruto looked down at his hands again. "I'm here. I'm alive. So that's not true, is it?" "Not completely. No," Kakashi said quietly. "It's not." Nobody said anything for a moment. Outside, the wind pushed softly against the walls of the house, and somewhere upstairs, faint and almost too quiet to notice, floorboards creaked. Inari, probably, listening from the top of the stairs, though nobody in the room below seemed to notice or mind. "There's more, isn't there?" Naruto said finally, and it wasn't really a question. Kakashi looked at him for a long moment, and something crossed his face that Naruto had never seen there before, something almost like grief, carefully worn down at the edges from years of practice hiding it. Your mother, Kakashi said slowly, was one of the last full-blooded Uzumaki to survive the fall of Yuzushiobikure. She came to Konoha as a child, grew up here, and eventually became a kunoichi of this village. Her name was Kushina. Kushina, Naruto repeated, and something about the shape of the word in his own mouth made his chest ache in a way he didn't fully understand. She was... Kakashi paused, and for just a moment the careful, controlled mask he wore so well slipped, and something warmer, something almost fond, bled through. She was loud. Fierce. Had a temper that could clear a room in about 4 seconds flat, and absolutely no patience for people who talked down to her. She had incredible chakra reserves, even by Uzumaki standards, and she was skilled enough with sealing techniques that people who knew what to look for called her the Red Death, because of her hair and how dangerous she was in a fight. A small, genuine smile tugged briefly at the corner of his mouth. She was also, from what I understand, exactly as stubborn as you are. Maybe more. Naruto stared at him, something enormous and complicated welling up behind his eyes that he didn't have a name for. You actually knew her? I met her a few times, when I was younger, Kakashi said. I wasn't close to her, not really. But I remember her well enough. Is she? Naruto's voice cracked slightly, and he cleared his throat, tried again. Is she still? He couldn't quite finish the question. He didn't have to. Kakashi's expression answered it before he said a single word, and Naruto felt something in his chest cave in quietly. An old ache he'd carried his entire life without ever having a name to put to it, now finally, suddenly, given one, and taken away in the very same breath. She passed away the night you were born, Kakashi said gently. I'm sorry, Naruto. I don't know all the details myself. That's information kept very carefully sealed by the third Hokage, and it's not mine to share even if I did know more. But I do know this much is true, she loved you. Whatever else happened that night, I know that for certain. Naruto didn't say anything for a long moment. Sakura's hand found his without either of them really deciding on it, just a small, steadying pressure. And even Sasuke, who had spent years wearing his own grief-like armor, who understood better than almost anyone else in that room what it meant to lose family before you were old enough to remember them properly, said nothing, just sat close, present, which was its own kind of comfort. What about my dad? Naruto asked finally, quiet. Kakashi hesitated, just slightly, just long enough that if you were watching closely, you'd have caught it, before shaking his head slowly. That's a harder question, and one I'm not able to answer for you right now. I promise you, it's not because I don't think you deserve to know. There are reasons, bigger than either of us, why some of this has to stay sealed for now. But I promise you this, Naruto, when the time is right, you'll get your answers. All of them. It wasn't the answer Naruto wanted. You could see that plainly on his face. But there was something steady and sincere in the way Kakashi said it that made him nod slowly instead of pushing, filing the question away in some part of himself for later. The way you save something too precious to spend all at once. So the chains, Sakura said after a moment, gently steering the conversation back, sensing Naruto needed a moment to breathe. That's an Uzumaki thing? A rare one, even among them, Kakashi confirmed, grateful, it seemed, for the shift. From what little I know, the Adamantine Sealing Chains were considered one of the Uzumaki clan's most formidable techniques. Chains of solidified chakra, strong enough to bind even massive, overwhelming amounts of chakra with almost no effort. They weren't just restraints. They could suppress and disrupt an enemy's chakra flow on contact, which is almost certainly what destabilized Zabuza's water prison today, even though you didn't strike the prison directly. That would explain why it fell apart when it did, Tazuna spoke up for the first time in a while, scratching his chin thoughtfully. I thought that fancy water sensei of yours had broken it himself. Didn't realize it was the kid. Neither did I, until just now, Kakashi admitted. Which tells me something important. Naruto's chains don't just need to make physical contact to have an effect. There's a wider disruptive field to them, at least under enough stress. That's actually remarkable, if it's true. And dangerous, if he can't control it. Naruto swallowed hard. So what happened out there? I didn't decide to do that. It just happened. Like a reflex. That tracks with everything I know about the technique, Kakashi said. From what little historical record survives about the Uzumaki, the chains were closely tied to strong emotion, usually the drive to protect someone. It's less a jutsu you consciously activate, at least at first, and more an instinct your body reaches for when it decides you're out of other options. He tilted his head slightly, which, for you, given what I saw today, seems to have been exactly the case. Naruto's shoulders sagged slightly. So I could have hurt Sasuke. Or Sakura-chan. Or you? I didn't even know what I was doing. You didn't, Kakashi agreed evenly. And that's exactly why we're going to fix that. Naruto looked up at him. From tomorrow, Kakashi continued, your training changes. We'll keep working on chakra control the way we have been, tree climbing, the fundamentals. But I want to start working with you directly on understanding this technique. Learning to call it consciously instead of only in moments of panic. Learning to control its strength, its range, when to release it and when to hold it back. He met Naruto's eyes steadily. This is a gift, Naruto, but an uncontrolled gift is just as dangerous as no gift at all, sometimes more. I won't let you walk around with something like that buried inside you and no idea how to use it safely, not for your sake, and not for anyone else's. For the first time since he'd woken up, something like his usual determination flickered back to life behind Naruto's eyes. He sat up a little straighter, wincing slightly at the pull of the bandages across his back, but not backing down from it. Okay, he said. Okay. Teach me. I want to actually understand this. I don't want to just get lucky again next time. I want it to actually mean something when I use it. Kakashi studied him for a long moment, and something that looked almost like pride settled quietly into the corners of his masked expression. Good answer, he said simply. Dinner that night was quieter than usual, though not in an unhappy way. More like the whole house was still processing the size of everything that had just been said out loud. Tsunami had prepared grilled fish with rice and vegetables, simple and warm, and set out cups of tea for everyone at the table. Inari came down for the meal this time, sliding into his seat without a word, though his eyes kept flicking toward Naruto with an expression that had shifted, subtly, from the wary distance of the past few days into something closer to curiosity. So you've got, like, superpowers now? Inari finally asked, halfway through the meal, in the blunt way only kids seem able to manage. I mean, Naruto paused, considering. A grin was already tugging at the corner of his mouth, the first real one since he'd woken up. Yeah. Kind of. I've got chains made of pure chakra buried in my blood from my mom's side, and Kakashi-sensei's gonna teach me how to actually use them on purpose instead of just when I'm about to get squished. He puffed his chest out slightly, wincing when it pulled at his bandages, but pushing through it anyway out of sheer stubbornness. Pretty cool, right? Inari looked at him for a long moment, something working behind his eyes that hadn't fully decided what it wanted to become yet. Cool doesn't matter if Gato's guys just kill you before you figure it out, he muttered finally, looking back down at his plate. Inari, Tsunami said quietly, a note of warning in her tone. It's fine, Naruto said, waving a hand, though something in his voice had gone a little more serious. Look, kid, I get it. You've watched people give up around here. I don't blame you for thinking that's just how it goes. But that's not gonna be me. I don't care how strong Zabuza is, or how many guys Gato throws at us. I'm not gonna stop, not until this bridge is built, and your village doesn't have to be scared anymore. That's a promise, and I never go back on my word. That's my ninja way. Inari didn't say anything to that. But he didn't argue either, and for a boy who'd spent the last several days flinching away from any conversation about hope, that quiet, unwilling silence was its own kind of small victory. Sasuke, watching from across the table, allowed himself the faintest ghost of a smile, gone almost as soon as it appeared, but they're all the same. Later that night, after the dishes had been cleared and the house had settled into the low creak and hush of everyone finding their way to sleep, Kakashi stepped outside onto the porch for some air, and wasn't entirely surprised when Naruto followed him out a few minutes later, moving slower than usual, still favoring the bandages across his back. Can't sleep? Kakashi asked without turning around, eyes on the dark shape of the half-built bridge visible even at this distance, its skeletal frame catching faint moonlight through the thinning mist. Too much to think about, I guess, Naruto admitted, coming to stand beside him, staring out at the same view. He was quiet for a moment, chewing on something before finally asking Kakashi-sensei, "Do you think she'd be proud of me?" "My mom, I mean. If she could see me right now." Kakashi glanced sideways at him, and whatever careful, measured caution had governed most of the conversation earlier that day softened, just for a moment, into something plainer and more honest. "I didn't know her well enough to answer that with certainty," he said. "But from everything I did know about her, yes, Naruto. I think she would be. I think she'd be proud of exactly the kind of person you're becoming, chains or no chains." Naruto didn't say anything to that. He just nodded slowly, looking back out at the bridge, at the mist still curling faintly over the water where somewhere out there, Zabuza and his mysterious masked companion were recovering, planning, waiting for their next chance. There was a storm coming. Everyone in that house could feel it, even without saying so out loud. But for the first time since this mission began, Naruto Uzumaki didn't feel like he was walking into it empty-handed. He had a name now. A history. A piece of his mother carried forward in his own blood, waiting to be understood instead of feared. Morning came to the land of waves the way it always seemed to lately, gray, damp, and heavy with mist that clung to the low hills around Tazina's house like it was reluctant to let the sun through. Naruto was awake before anyone else for once, sitting up on his sleeping mat in the pale half-light, quietly flexing his shoulders and wincing at the dull ache still lingering beneath yesterday's bandages. Chains, he thought, staring down at his own hands in the dimness. I've got actual chains inside me. From my mom. It still didn't feel entirely real. Somewhere between waking up in a puddle of sweat with no memory of what he'd done, and hearing Kakashi lay out an entire hidden history of his own bloodline over dinner, something fundamental about who Naruto thought he was had quietly rearranged itself, and he hadn't fully caught up to the new shape of it yet. He was still turning it over in his head when Kakashi's voice came from the doorway, low so as not to wake the others. "You're up early." Naruto startled slightly, then grinned, some of his usual energy flickering back into his face despite the early hour. "Couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about yesterday." "Good," Kakashi said. "Get dressed. We're starting before breakfast today." The training clearing Kakashi picked wasn't far from the house, a flat stretch of grass ringed by tall trees, close enough to Tazina's home that Sasuke and Sakura could join partway through their own chakra control practice, but private enough that Kakashi could keep a careful eye on things without an audience of curious villagers wandering by. "Before we do anything with the chains," Kakashi said, settling onto a low rock at the clearing's edge, "I want to understand exactly what happened yesterday, as best you can describe it. Walk me through it." Naruto frowned, trying to pull the memory back into focus. "It's hard. Like trying to remember a dream after you wake up. I remember being scared, really scared, like actually terrified, watching you trapped and Sasuke about to get hit, and then there's this feeling, like something inside my chest just snapped open. After that it's mostly blank until I woke up here." "That matches what I suspected," Kakashi said, nodding slowly. "The chains responded to an emotional trigger, not a conscious command. That's actually useful information, even if it doesn't feel like it. It tells us where to start." "So how do we start?" Naruto asked, practically vibrating with impatience already. "Carefully," Kakashi said, in a tone that made it very clear there would be no shortcuts today. "First, I want you to try summoning even a small amount of that chakra on purpose, without the fear driving it. No life or death pressure. Just you, reaching for that same sensation you felt yesterday, and trying to call it up voluntarily. Start small. I don't want a repeat of yesterday's fireworks in a controlled setting. That's how people get hurt." Naruto nodded, planting his feet, closing his eyes the way he'd seen Kakashi do before performing hand seals, and reached inward for that same feeling, that sensation of something ancient, and coiled just behind his ribs, waiting. Nothing happened. He tried again, brow furrowing, fists clenching at his sides. Still nothing. "It's not working," Naruto huffed after his fifth attempt, arms falling to his sides in frustration. "I don't get it. Yesterday it just happened. Why can't I do it now?" "Because yesterday, your entire body believed it was about to lose people you love," Kakashi said patiently. Right now, you're standing safely in a clearing trying to force something that, as far as your instincts are concerned, has no reason to appear. That's actually a good sign, in a strange way. It means the chains aren't leaking out randomly. They're specifically tied to threat and protection. But it also means we have to find another way in. So what do I do? Naruto asked, some of the frustration bleeding into real uncertainty now. Kakashi considered this for a moment, tapping his chin thoughtfully. Chakra itself always responds to intention and emotion, even without a bloodline involved. That's the entire foundation of every technique you'll ever learn. The trick with a technique like yours, from what little I understand of Uzumaki sealing methods, is learning to recreate the feeling without needing the actual danger behind it. So instead of trying to force the chains directly, I want you to try something else first. Close your eyes again. But this time, instead of reaching for the chains, I want you to think about the moment right before they appeared. Not the fear, the thing underneath the fear. What were you actually feeling, right at the very center of it? Naruto closed his eyes again, quieter this time, actually thinking instead of just straining. I didn't want Sasuke to get hurt, he said slowly. I didn't want you to die trapped in that water thing. I really didn't want to lose anyone. There it is, Kakashi said quietly. That's the actual root of it, Naruto. Not fear. Determination to protect. Fear was just the spark that lit it yesterday, because the danger was real and immediate. But the chains themselves, I suspect, are key to that deeper drive, the same thing, more or less, that makes you throw yourself into fights you have no business winning. Try again. This time, don't chase the fear. Chase that feeling instead. Naruto took a slow breath, steadying himself, and reached inward again, not for panic this time, but for that stubborn, burning certainty that lived somewhere under all his noise and bluster, the thing that had made him stand his ground against Mizuki back at the academy, the thing that made him promise Inari at dinner that he wouldn't stop no matter what Gato threw at them. Something shifted. It wasn't the explosive, violent tearing sensation from the day before. This time it was smaller, a warm, prickling heat spreading out along his shoulder blades, and then, with a faint metallic shimmer, a single thin chain of golden-white chakra unspooled slowly from his right forearm, hovering in the air like a curious, half-formed thought. Naruto's eyes flew open, and a grin split across his face so wide it looked like it might hurt. I did it! Kakashi-sensei, look, The chain, apparently sensing his shift in focus, whipped sideways without warning and slammed into a nearby tree hard enough to snap a branch clean off. Okay, that part one didn't mean to do, Naruto admitted sheepishly, as the chain dissolved back into nothing, leaving him swaying slightly on his feet. Kakashi, to his credit, didn't laugh, though something in his visible eye crinkled with clear amusement. That's an excellent start, he said. Genuinely, you called it consciously, on your very first real attempt. Most bloodline techniques take far longer than that to summon reliably even once. But you're right that control is a completely separate problem, and it's the one we're going to spend the most time on. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck, chest still heaving slightly from the effort. It felt different than yesterday. Smaller, like there's a lot more where that came from, but I could barely get a trickle of it out. That's expected, Kakashi said. You accessed a fraction of what you used under real threat. That's actually good. Controlled small releases are exactly how we build up your ability to manage larger ones safely. Try it again. Same feeling. This time, once the chain forms, I want you to try holding it steady instead of letting it react on its own. Treat it less like throwing a punch, and more like holding your arm out and keeping it still. It took Naruto 11 more attempts before he managed to keep a single chain hovering, trembling but stable, in the air in front of him for a full 3 seconds before it dissolved. By the 20th attempt, he could hold it for nearly 10. His legs were shaking with the effort by the time Kakashi finally called a break, chakra exhaustion creeping up on him in a slow, unfamiliar way that felt different from ordinary physical tiredness, deeper somehow, like something in his very bones had been worked hard rather than just his muscles. That's enough for the chains today, Kakashi said, watching him carefully for any sign he'd pushed too far. We'll build up slowly. Overextending a bloodline technique before your control catches up to your reserves is a good way to hurt yourself, and I'd rather you progress steadily than risk a setback. Man, Naruto groaned, flopping backward onto the grass, staring up at the gray morning sky. This is way harder than tree climbing. It's supposed to be, Kakashi said, not unkindly. Speaking of which, up. We're doing the tree exercise next. Can't let your fundamentals slip just because you've got something flashier to work on. Naruto groaned louder, but he got up anyway. By the time Sasuke and Sakura wandered into the clearing an hour later, having finished their own morning routine back at the house, Naruto was upside down against a tree trunk, having overcorrected his chakra output on his 40-somethingth attempt, and stuck himself sideways to the bark at an extremely undignified angle. Do I want to know? Sasuke asked, staring up at him. It's a system. Naruto shouted from his position, arms crossed defensively even while hanging horizontally off the trunk. I'm working out the kinks. You're working out gravity, mostly, Sakura said, though there was a faint, reluctant smile tugging at her mouth as she said it. Kakashi, watching from the rock, allowed himself the ghost of a chuckle before clapping his hands together. All right. Since you're both here, let's make good use of the morning. Sasuke, Sakura, continue your tree climbing drills, same as yesterday. Focus on holding position longer without adjustment. Naruto, he glanced up at where Naruto was still stuck to the tree, slowly sliding down the bark inch by inch. Once you've detached yourself from that trunk, you'll alternate between tree climbing and chain control exercises. I want everyone building stamina today. The next several hours fell into a familiar, grinding rhythm, one that, if you've followed this channel before, you'll recognize as the backbone of every great training arc. Sasuke's tree walking had grown almost effortless by now, his chakra control precise enough that he could walk fully vertical without so much as a wobble, though the effort of maintaining it for extended periods still visibly cost him. Sakura, whose reserves were smaller but whose control had always outpaced her teammates, managed to hold her position the longest of the three, something she took quiet, genuine pride in even as she brushed off the compliments Kakashi occasionally offered. Naruto, meanwhile, was a study in contrasts. His tree climbing remained explosively inconsistent, some attempts sending him rocketing halfway up the trunk before losing his grip entirely, others ending in an immediate faceplant the second his foot touched bark. But something had shifted in the quality of his frustration since yesterday, where he used to grit his teeth and force more raw chakra into each attempt. Now he was pausing between tries, actually thinking, adjusting in small increments the way Kakashi kept encouraging him to. You're getting better at listening to your own chakra, Kakashi observed at one point, watching Naruto climb nearly 2/3 up a trunk before losing his footing. That's not nothing. A week ago you would have just kept throwing more power at the problem until something broke. Yeah, well, Naruto said, brushing dirt off his jacket as he picked himself up off the ground for the 5th time that hour. Guess almost dying makes you think a little harder about doing things right. It wasn't said as a joke, not really, and something in Kakashi's expression flickered with quiet approval at the honesty of it. Sasuke, a short distance away, had been quietly watching Naruto's chain exercises out of the corner of his eye all morning, and it was during one of the brief rest breaks that his curiosity finally got the better of him. How does it feel? Sasuke asked, dropping down to sit near where Naruto was catching his breath, careful to keep his tone casual even though the question clearly mattered to him. The chains? Naruto blinked, surprised by the question. I dunno. Kinda warm, I guess. Like something waking up that's been asleep a long time. Why? Sasuke was quiet for a moment, staring at his own hands. The Sharingan felt different when it first activated. Sharper. Like the world got clearer but colder at the same time. He hesitated, something conflicted crossing his usually guarded face. I never really thought about what it means, having a bloodline. It was just there. Something I inherited because of who my family was. But you didn't even know yours existed until yesterday. Naruto considered that for a moment, picking absently at the grass beside him. Guess that's true. Feels kinda weird, honestly. Like finding out there was this whole other part of me I never got to meet. He glanced sideways at Sasuke. Is that how it was for you? With the Sharingan? Something shuddered briefly behind Sasuke's eyes, a flicker of old grief that neither of them addressed directly, though both of them recognized it for exactly what it was. Something like that, Sasuke said quietly, and left it there. Neither of them pushed further. If you've watched this dynamic develop as long as some of you have, you know that's actually progress for these two boys who'd spent months needling each other over every little thing, finding, in the middle of a mission that kept trying to kill them, something quieter and more honest passing between them instead. For what it's worth, Sasuke added after a moment, standing and brushing grass off his pants, yesterday was impressive. Even if you don't remember doing it. Naruto's head whipped up so fast it was almost comedic. Wait, did Sasuke Uchiha just compliment me? Don't get used to it, Sasuke said, already walking away, though the corner of his mouth twitched upward before he turned fully. Naruto sat there grinning at his retreating back for a solid 10 seconds before Kakashi's voice called him back to the exercises. And honestly, that grin didn't fully fade for the rest of the morning. They broke for a midday meal back at Tazuna's house, more grilled fish, rice, and a simple vegetable soup that Tsunami had put together, with cups of tea passed around the table. Inari joined them again, and this time he didn't retreat immediately after eating, lingering instead at the edge of the room while the genin traded stories about the morning's training. You almost knocked yourself out on a tree, Sakura told Naruto, not bothering to hide her amusement. 3 separate times. It builds character, Naruto said with as much dignity as he could muster, which wasn't much. It builds bruises, Sasuke corrected. Inari, watching from near the doorway, found himself, almost against his will, cracking the faintest smile at the exchange, quickly hidden behind his sleeve when Naruto caught him looking. You wanna come watch this afternoon? Naruto asked, catching the boy off guard. Might be boring, honestly, it's mostly me falling over. But you could see the chain thing again, if you want. Inari hesitated, clearly torn between his carefully maintained wall of indifference and genuine curiosity that had been building since the day before. Maybe, he mumbled finally, which, for Inari, was practically an enthusiastic yes. Tsunami, watching the exchange from where she was clearing the table, met Kakashi's eye across the room with a small, grateful look that didn't need any words to explain itself. Something about Naruto's stubborn refusal to let Inari's walls stay up entirely was working, slowly, in a way that lectures and reassurances from adults hadn't quite managed to on their own. The afternoon session brought a small audience, Inari, true to his hesitant maybe, trailing along at a distance and settling onto a fallen log at the edge of the clearing, watching with poorly disguised interest as Naruto squared up for another round of chain exercises. Same as this morning, Kakashi instructed. Find that feeling. Call up a single chain. Hold it steady. We're going to work on duration and stability before we even think about trying to control its movement. Naruto nodded, closing his eyes, reaching for that stubborn, burning certainty again. It came easier this time, not effortless, but noticeably less of a fight than his first attempts that morning. A single chain shimmered into existence along his forearm, and this time, instead of whipping wildly at the first sign of his attention, it hovered, trembling slightly, but holding. Good, Kakashi said, watching closely. Now very slowly, I want you to try extending it. Just an inch. Don't rush it. Naruto concentrated, sweat beading at his temple with the effort of it, and the chain crept forward, barely, just a fraction, before snapping back with a small metallic thwip like an overstretched rubber band, dissolving entirely. Ow, Naruto muttered, shaking out his arm. That's fine, Kakashi said. That's exactly the kind of failure we want right now, small, controlled, informative. You're learning the edges of what you can currently manage. That's progress, even if it doesn't feel like it. They kept at it for another hour, Naruto's success rate slowly, incrementally improving. By his 15th attempt at extension, he managed to stretch the chain nearly a full foot from his arm before it snapped back, and by his 20th, he could hold that extended length steady for almost 2 full seconds. Inari, watching from his log, had gone quiet in the particular way of someone paying closer attention than they wanted to admit. It's kinda like the fishing line, he said suddenly, breaking his own silence, startling everyone slightly since he hadn't spoken in nearly an hour. Naruto blinked, chain dissolving as his concentration broke. Huh! When Inari stopped himself, jaw tightening for a second before he pushed through it. When I used to fish with my dad. You gotta feel the line, not just yank on it. If you fight it too hard it snaps. You gotta work with how much give it's got. There was a beat of silence in the clearing, and something in Kakashi's expression sharpened with quiet interest. That's actually a very good way to put it, he said. Naruto, try that. Don't fight the chain's resistance. Work with it, the way Inari described. Naruto glanced over at Inari, something warm and grateful crossing his face. Thanks, kid. That actually helps. Inari shrugged, looking almost embarrassed at the sudden attention, but he didn't retreat this time, staying planted on his log as Naruto tried again, and this time, working with the resistance instead of muscling through it. The chain extended smoothly to nearly 2 feet, holding steady for almost 5 full seconds before finally dissolving. There it is, Kakashi said, satisfaction clear in his voice. That's the difference between forcing a technique and actually understanding it. Naruto, breathing hard but grinning ear to ear, glanced back at Inari. See? Told you it'd be worth watching. For the first time since Team 7 had arrived in Wave, Inari actually smiled. A small, real one, quickly hidden but undeniably there. By the time the sun began sinking low behind the mist-shrouded hills, all 3 genin were thoroughly exhausted, and Kakashi called the day's training to a close. Sasuke had managed to hold a full vertical position on his tree for nearly a full minute without slipping, a new personal best. Sakura had extended her own record even further, drawing a rare, genuine compliment from Kakashi about her chakra efficiency. And Naruto, though still far from anything resembling mastery, had gone from being unable to summon so much as a flicker of chain on command to holding one steady, extended nearly 2 feet, for several seconds at a stretch. Tomorrow, Kakashi said as they packed up to head back, we start working on multiple chains at once. Slowly. And I want you thinking tonight about control under pressure, not panic, but focused pressure, the kind you might actually face in a real fight. We don't have the luxury of assuming Zabuza's finished with us. The reminder settled over the group like the mist itself, quiet but impossible to ignore. Whatever peace they'd carved out over the past 2 days of training was borrowed time, and everyone in that clearing knew it. Still, as they walked back toward Tazuna's house in the fading light, Inari trailing a little closer to the group than he had at the start of the day, something in the atmosphere had shifted, not fear exactly, but a kind of stubborn, hard-won hope, the sort that takes root slowly after a long time spent starved of it. Hey Inari, Naruto said as they walked, you should come to training again tomorrow. I bet by the time I'm done, I'll have like 5 of these chains going at once. It'll be way cooler. You couldn't even hold on to one for more than a few seconds today, Inari pointed out, though there wasn't any real bite in it. Exactly. So imagine how awesome it'll look once I actually get good at it, Naruto said, entirely undeterred, throwing an arm behind his head as he walked. That's the whole point. You gotta start bad at everything before you get good, believe it. Anybody who tells you different is lying. Inari didn't respond right away, but he didn't argue either, and by the time they reached the house, something in his usual guarded posture had loosened just slightly, like a knot worked slowly looser over the course of an afternoon. Kakashi, walking a short distance behind the genin with Tazuna, watched the exchange with quiet, thoughtful eyes. He's good with that kid, Tazuna observed. He's good at not giving up on people, Kakashi said simply. It's one of his best qualities. Possibly his best. Tazuna huffed something that might have been agreement, watching his grandson walk a little taller than he had in weeks. That night, after dinner had been cleared and the house had settled into its familiar evening quiet, Naruto lay on his sleeping mat staring up at the ceiling, exhaustion pulling at every muscle in his body in a way that felt strangely satisfying rather than draining. Beside him, Sasuke was already asleep, and across the room, Sakura had drifted off not long after, worn out from a full day of training. Naruto flexed his fingers slowly in the dark, feeling for that faint, warm hum still lingering somewhere beneath his ribs, smaller now, quieter, but undeniably present in a way it had never been before yesterday. Chains, huh, he thought, a small smile tugging at his mouth even as his eyes grew heavy. Guess I've got a lot to live up to, Mom. Outside, the mist rolled on over the land of waves, thick and patient, and somewhere out in that fog, Zabuza Momochi was healing, and planning, and waiting for the moment he'd get to test exactly how much stronger this strange Uzumaki boy had become. That moment was coming faster than any of them realized. But for tonight at least, Team 7 slept a little easier than they had in days, and Naruto Uzumaki drifted off with his mother's name echoing quietly in his thoughts. One small step closer to understanding the legacy sleeping in his blood. Naruto woke before dawn, which, if you know anything about this particular knucklehead, should tell you immediately that something unusual was going on. 2 days of grinding, repetitive training had done something strange to him. Instead of sleeping in and complaining about breakfast, he found himself lying awake in the pre-dawn dark, turning over in his mind the extra foot of extension he managed on his chain the day before, itching to see if he could push it further before Kakashi even called the session to order. He slipped out of the house quietly, careful not to wake Sasuke or Sakura, leaving a scrawled note on the table for Tsunami in case anyone came looking for him. The morning air outside was cold and damp, the mist thinner at this hour but still clinging low to the ground, curling around his ankles as he made his way toward a clearing a little deeper into the woods than the one Kakashi usually used, a private spot he'd scouted the day before, half hoping to surprise his sensei with some extra progress. Okay, Naruto muttered to himself, rolling his shoulders and planting his feet in the damp grass. Let's see if I can do 5 feet today instead of 2. He closed his eyes, reaching for that familiar warmth beneath his ribs, and a single chain shimmered into existence along his forearm, trembling slightly as he coaxed it forward, working with its resistance the way Inari had described rather than forcing it. It crept out steadily, 1 foot, then 2, then, with a fierce effort of concentration, nearly 3.5, before snapping back with a sharp metallic sound and dissolving into nothing, leaving Naruto breathing hard, grinning despite the small failure. Almost, he said to the empty clearing. Come on, just a little more, that's an unusual technique. Naruto nearly jumped out of his skin. He spun around, kunai already half drawn on reflex, to find a figure standing at the edge of the clearing, a young person, maybe a year or 2 older than him, dressed in a simple pink kimono-style top over dark, practical trousers, sleeves long enough to cover the wrists, a woven basket balanced against one hip. Long dark hair framed a face that was calm, unreadable, and, Naruto noted with a flush of embarrassment at having been caught mid-training, quietly amused. Whoa! Where'd you come from? Naruto blurted, lowering the kunai but not quite relaxing. I've been gathering herbs since before sunrise, the stranger said, lifting the basket slightly by way of explanation. Inside, Naruto could see a modest collection of roots and pale wildflowers, damp with morning dew. I didn't mean to startle you. You were quite absorbed in what you were doing. Oh. Yeah, well. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck, some of his usual bravado creeping back, and now that the immediate alarm had passed. I was just training. It's a technique I'm working on. Pretty advanced stuff, actually. It looked difficult, the stranger said, stepping a little closer, dark eyes tracking the spot where the chain had dissolved with an interest that seemed genuine rather than merely polite. I've never seen anything quite like it. Chakra given a physical shape like that. Most techniques I know of manipulate the environment or the body. Yours seemed to be neither. Naruto blinked, caught off guard by how precisely the observation landed. Yeah, exactly. It's this whole bloodline thing, actually. I only found out about it a couple days ago. Chains, made of chakra. My mom's clan had it, apparently, though I never even knew about her until my sensei told me. Something flickered briefly behind the stranger's calm expression. Too quick for Naruto to properly place, gone again almost before it registered. That sounds like quite a discovery, they said instead, tone even. To learn something so significant about yourself so suddenly. Yeah, it's been kind of a lot, Naruto admitted, dropping down to sit on a nearby fallen log, chakra exhaustion from his early training session catching up with him now that the adrenaline of being startled had worn off. But it's cool too. Like, I never really knew anything about my family before. Now I've at least got this one thing. He glanced up. Hey, what are you doing out here so early anyway? Kinda dangerous, isn't it? I heard there's some bad guys running around the land of waves right now. I know, the stranger said, settling gracefully onto a rock a short distance away, setting the basket down beside them. That's actually part of why I gather herbs so early. Fewer people around to notice. Huh. Guess that makes sense. Naruto tilted his head, studying them curiously. I'm Naruto, by the way. Naruto Uzumaki. Future Hokage, believe it, Something that might have been genuine amusement tugged briefly at the stranger's mouth. That's an ambitious title to claim so young. It's not claiming if you actually do it, Naruto shot back, grinning. So what's your name? There was the barest hesitation, so brief Naruto almost missed it, before the answer came, smooth and unhurried. Haku. Haku, Naruto repeated. Cool name. So Haku, you live around here? You don't really seem like you're from a village or anything. I travel with someone important to me, Haku said carefully, gaze drifting toward the herbs in the basket rather than meeting Naruto's eyes directly. We don't stay in one place for very long. That sounds kinda lonely, Naruto said, without really thinking about it, the words slipping out with the same blunt honesty that colored most of what he said. Haku looked up at that, something unreadable passing behind those calm dark eyes. It can be, they admitted after a moment. But I have someone who matters to me. That makes it easier. Yeah, I get that, Naruto said, nodding, thinking of Kakashi and Sasuke and Sakura, of Iruka-sensei back home, of the strange, tentative warmth that had bloomed in his chest the past couple days as he'd started piecing together a family history he never knew he had. Having people who matter, that's basically everything, right? Haku studied him for a long moment, something in their expression shifting subtly, growing more thoughtful. Can I ask you something, Naruto? Sure, go for it. Do you think a person can become truly strong, Haku said slowly, choosing each word with obvious care, only once they have something, or someone, precious to protect? Naruto blinked, caught off guard by the sudden weight of the question, so different from the easy small talk of a moment before. He thought about it seriously, though, chewing on his lip, because if there was one thing Naruto Uzumaki never did, it was brush off a real question with a joke. I think so, yeah, he said finally. I mean, look at what happened with these chains. I didn't even know I had them until the moment I thought I was gonna lose my sensei and my teammate. It wasn't training that brought them out. It was that. Wanting to protect them so bad that something inside me just broke open. He paused, frowning slightly as he worked through the thought out loud. I think maybe that's true for a lot of things. Like, strength by itself doesn't really mean anything if there's nothing you're using it for. It's just power sitting there. But when you've got someone you care about on the other side of it, suddenly it means something. Suddenly you'll push past stuff you didn't think you could. Haku was quiet for a long moment, staring at him with an expression that had gone somewhere far away, somewhere Naruto couldn't follow. That's very close to something someone I care about believes as well, Haku said finally, quietly. Though he never phrased it quite so plainly. Yeah? Sounds like a smart guy, Naruto said, missing entirely the strange, heavy undercurrent in Haku's voice. He's complicated, Haku said, something almost fond and almost sad tangled together in the words. But he took me in when I had nothing and no one. Gave me a purpose. I owe him everything, and I intend to spend my strength making sure nothing ever threatens what little peace he's found. A pause. Even if that means becoming a weapon rather than a person, in the moments that call for it. Something in that sentence sat wrong in Naruto's chest, though he couldn't quite articulate why. A weapon, huh? He repeated slowly. That sounds kinda sad, honestly. Like there's not much room left over in that for just being you. Haku's gaze sharpened slightly, surprised by the observation. You think there's a difference? Course there is, Naruto said, with the easy, unshakable certainty that only comes from someone who hasn't yet learned to doubt his own convictions. Being strong for someone you care about is one thing, but turning yourself into just a tool for them, that's different. That's giving up the parts of you that made them care about you in the first place, isn't it? He shrugged, a little self-conscious suddenly at how seriously he'd answered. I dunno. Maybe I'm wrong, but if somebody important to me tried to turn me into just a weapon and nothing else, I think that'd actually make me pretty sad for them. Like they didn't think the rest of me was worth keeping around. Haku said nothing for a long moment, dark eyes fixed on Naruto with an intensity that made him shift slightly, unsure if he'd overstepped some invisible line. Then, slowly, something in Haku's carefully composed expression cracked, not into distress, exactly, but into something quieter and more vulnerable than anything they'd shown since the conversation began. You're a very unusual person, Naruto, Haku said softly. I get that a lot, Naruto admitted, grinning slightly to cut the sudden tension. Usually not meant as a compliment, though. I meant it as one, Haku said, and something in the sincerity of it made Naruto's grin soften into something more genuine. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment after that, the mist slowly beginning to thin as the sun climbed higher behind the gray clouds. Naruto found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't quite expected around a total stranger, something easy and unguarded about Haku's presence that reminded him, distantly, of the rare, quiet moments with Iruka-sensei back in Konoha, the sense of being genuinely listened to, rather than dismissed. "Can I see it again?" Haku asked eventually, nodding toward Naruto's arm. "The chain technique." "I promise I'm only curious." Naruto hesitated for half a second, some old, cautious instinct flickering briefly at the edge of his thoughts. A small warning he didn't quite know how to name, before shrugging it off entirely. Haku didn't feel like a threat. If anything, this whole conversation felt like exactly the kind of thing Kakashi kept telling him to pay more attention to: honest exchange, real connection, the sort of thing that made a person stronger rather than just louder. "Sure, why not?" Naruto said, standing and rolling his shoulders. "Fair warning, I'm still pretty new at this." He closed his eyes, reaching for that warm, coiled sensation beneath his ribs, and a single chain shimmered into being along his forearm once more, trembling, but steadier than it had been even a few days before. He extended it slowly, working with the resistance the way he practiced, managing nearly 3 feet this time before it snapped back and dissolved. Haku watched with an expression of open, careful fascination, the fascination, Naruto would realize much later, of someone cataloging something dangerous with the precision of long professional habit rather than idle curiosity. But in the moment, all Naruto saw was genuine interest, and it made him puff up with pride despite himself. "That's remarkable," Haku said quietly. "I've never encountered anything quite like it before. The way it moves, there's an almost suppressive quality to the chakra itself, isn't there? Not just physical force." Naruto blinked, surprised. "Yeah, actually. My sensei said the same thing, that they can mess with an enemy's own chakra flow when they hit, not just knock stuff around." "How'd you figure that out just from watching?" "I've studied a fair amount of chakra theory," Haku said, deflecting smoothly, though something flickered behind the calm explanation that Naruto, still too new to reading underlying tension, didn't quite catch. "It's a useful thing to understand, when the person you care about relies on precise chakra control in his own work." "Guess that makes sense," Naruto said, shaking out his arm, chakra exhaustion beginning to pull at him again after the demonstration. "Man, I really gotta build up my reserves for this thing. Right now I can barely manage a few seconds before I'm wiped." "It will come with time," Haku said. "Strength like that, the kind tied to real intention, not just raw power, tends to grow the most in the moments right before it's needed most." Something about the phrasing sent a small, strange chill down Naruto's spine, though he couldn't say exactly why. He shook it off after a second, chalking it up to nothing more than nerves and lingering fatigue. "You talk kinda like a fortune teller, you know that?" Naruto said instead, grinning to lighten the mood. Haku's mouth curved into the faintest real smile, the first unguarded one Naruto had seen since they'd started talking. "Perhaps I do." They talked a while longer, nothing quite as heavy as before, mostly small things. Haku asked about Konoha, about what it was like to grow up wanting to become Hokage, listening with quiet, genuine attention that made Naruto talk more freely than he usually did with mere strangers. Naruto, in turn, asked about the herbs in the basket, about the person Haku traveled with, though Haku kept those answers carefully vague, always circling back before revealing anything concrete. If you're watching this scene with the benefit of already knowing where this story is headed, you can probably feel the weight sitting underneath every one of Haku's careful non-answers. The quiet tragedy of two people from opposite sides of an approaching fight, finding, entirely by accident, something honest and human in each other before either of them fully understands what that's going to cost. Eventually, the sun climbed high enough to burn away most of the lingering mist, and Haku rose from the rock, gathering the basket of herbs back against one hip. "I should get back," Haku said. "I've been gone longer than I intended." "Yeah, I should probably head back too before my sensei notices I snuck off early," Naruto admitted, standing and stretching out the last of the stiffness from his shoulders. "This was cool though. Talking, I mean." "Thanks." "Thank you as well," Haku said, and there was something quietly sincere in it that made Naruto smile without quite understanding why it mattered so much. I don't often get the chance for conversations like this. Well, hey, maybe we'll run into each other again, Naruto said. Small forest, apparently? Something flickered across Haku's face at that. Too quick and too complicated for Naruto to fully parse, gone before he could ask about it. Perhaps, Haku said softly. I hope, for both our sakes, that if we do, it's under kinder circumstances than the ones I suspect are coming. Okay, that got kinda ominous all of a sudden, Naruto said, laughing uncertainly, though something in his gut had gone tight and wary again. Forgive me, Haku said, offering a small, genuine smile that didn't quite banish the sadness sitting behind it. Be well, Naruto Uzumaki. I mean that. And then Haku was gone, slipping between the trees with a quiet, economical grace that Naruto, if he'd been paying closer attention, if he hadn't been so thoroughly disarmed by the whole strange, gentle encounter, might have recognized as something far more practiced than an ordinary traveler's footsteps. He stood alone in the clearing for a long moment afterward, turning the conversation over in his head, that small, persistent unease still sitting oddly in his chest even as the rest of him replayed the easy warmth of talking with someone who'd actually listened. He couldn't have told you exactly why the encounter left him feeling the way it did. He just knew, somehow, that it mattered, that whoever Haku was, they'd see each other again, and that when they did, things were not going to be nearly so simple. Haku moved swiftly and silently through the trees, putting real distance between the clearing and the modest, hidden shelter where Zabuza was recovering, mind turning over everything that had just happened with careful, methodical precision, the precision of someone who had learned long ago never to let sentiment interfere with duty, and who was only now, for the first time in longer than they cared to admit, finding that discipline harder to maintain than expected. Chakra chains, Haku thought, replaying the golden-white shimmer of that single extended chain, the strange suppressive quality humming beneath its surface. An Uzumaki. There haven't been true Uzumaki recorded in Kirigakure's archives in years. If Zabuza-sama learns what I just learned. The thought trailed off, unfinished and uncomfortable, because Haku already knew exactly what Zabuza would do with information like that. A rare bloodline, freshly manifested and still barely controlled, wielded by a genin who had no idea yet how dangerous, or how valuable, that made him. Zabuza wouldn't hesitate to see it as either a threat to be eliminated quickly, before it grew any stronger, or a prize worth capturing outright. Haku thought of the easy, unguarded warmth in Naruto's voice as he talked about wanting to become Hokage, thought of the plain, unpretentious conviction behind his answer about strength and precious people, an answer that had landed somewhere deep and unexpected, somewhere Haku hadn't realized still existed underneath years of careful self-erasure in service of Zabuza's cause. He said turning yourself into only a weapon means giving up the parts of you that made someone care in the first place. Haku slowed to a stop beneath the shelter of a wide, moss-heavy tree, staring down at the basket of herbs still balanced against one hip, throat suddenly, unexpectedly tight. It would have been easy, simple, even, to report everything back to Zabuza the moment they returned. The chains. The bloodline. The clear signs of a technique still raw and unrefined, vulnerable to exploitation by anyone who understood its weaknesses quickly enough. It was exactly the kind of intelligence Zabuza would expect, exactly the kind of usefulness that justified Haku's place at his side. And yet, Haku thought of Naruto's easy grin, his blunt, unpolished honesty, the genuine warmth in his voice when he'd said that sounds kinda lonely without a trace of pity in it, just simple, uncomplicated concern for a stranger he'd known less than an hour. It had been a very long time since anyone had spoken to Haku like that, long enough that the feeling it left behind was almost unbearably foreign. I don't have to tell him everything, Haku thought slowly, testing the shape of the decision even as guilt curled tight and uncomfortable in the pit of the stomach. Zabuza-sama needs to know the boy is dangerous. He doesn't need to know how, exactly. Not yet. Not until I understand a little better what it is I'm actually protecting by staying quiet. It wasn't defiance, not really. Haku would never have called it that, not even privately. It was something smaller and more uncertain, a single-held breath of hesitation, a private choice to withhold one piece of a larger truth, made not out of betrayal but out of some tangled, unfamiliar instinct that Haku didn't yet have the language to fully understand. Whether that hesitation would matter, in the end, was a question Haku carried the rest of the way back through the mist-heavy trees, unanswered, and, for the first time in longer than could easily be remembered, genuinely afraid of what the answer might turn out to be. By the time Haku slipped back into the small, hidden shelter where Zabuza lay recovering, propped against a makeshift bedroll with bandages still wrapped tight across his chest and shoulder, the careful, composed mask had settled firmly back into place. "You were gone a long time," Zabuza rasped, one eye cracking open as Haku set the basket of herbs down near the small fire. "Trouble?" "No trouble," Haku said evenly, beginning to sort the herbs with practiced, steady hands. "The forest was quiet this morning," Zabuza grunted, settling back against the bedroll, clearly still weak from the previous encounter but healing steadily under Haku's careful attention. "Good. We'll need every bit of strength back before we finish what we started with that copy ninja." A pause, and something sharper crept into his rough voice. "That chain brat, too. Whatever that was, I intend to understand it before we're through here." Haku's hand stilled for just a fraction of a second over the herbs, so brief, so carefully controlled, that Zabuza, still weak and half-lidded with exhaustion, didn't catch it at all. "Of course, Zabuza-sama," Haku said quietly, resuming the careful, practiced motion of sorting roots from wildflowers, giving nothing else away. Outside, the mist continued its slow, patient roll across the land of waves, indifferent to the quiet storm of conflicted loyalty settling deeper into Haku's chest with every passing hour, a storm that neither Zabuza, nor Naruto, nor anyone else in this story yet realized was building at all. The morning started like any other. Training, breakfast, the familiar rhythm the team had settled into over the past several days in Wave. But there was something different in the air by the time Team 7 made their way toward the bridge that afternoon to check on the construction crew's progress. A stillness that felt less like calm and more like held breath. Naruto felt it first, oddly enough. He couldn't have told you why. Maybe it was the way the mist had thickened again overnight, curling low and heavy over the water despite the relatively clear skies of the past 2 days. Maybe it was something in his gut, some instinct he hadn't had before the chains woke up, quietly warning him that the peace they'd all been enjoying was about to run out. "You're quiet," Sakura noted, walking beside him along the dirt path toward the docks. "That's twice this week. I'm starting to worry." "Just thinking," Naruto said, which was true enough, though he didn't elaborate. He hadn't told anyone about the forest, about Haku, about the strange, unplaceable weight of that conversation. Some part of him wanted to hold on to it a little longer before turning it into something the others might pick apart, or worry over. They reached the bridge a short while later, its half-finished span stretching out over the gray water, workers moving along the scaffolding with the tired, determined efficiency of people who'd learned not to waste a single hour of good weather. Tazuna strode ahead to check in with his crew, calling out instructions, his voice carrying strong and steady across the open water, a far cry from the nervous, secretive man who'd first hired Team 7 back in Konoha. Kakashi walked a few paces behind the genin, posture relaxed but his visible eye doing its usual quiet work, scanning the tree line at the bridge's far end, the water beneath the pylons, the thinning mist rolling in off the sea. If you've paid attention to this story at all, you know that particular kind of watchfulness from Kakashi rarely comes from nowhere. "Sensei," Sasuke said quietly, falling into step beside him. "Something feel off to you too?" "It has for the last hour," Kakashi admitted, just as quietly. "Stay close to Tazuna. All of you." They didn't have long to wait. The mist rolled in fast, far faster than natural weather ever moved, swallowing the bridge whole in a matter of seconds, thick enough that Naruto lost sight of Sakura standing only a few feet away. Workers' shouts of confusion rose up around them, quickly dissolving into panic as visibility dropped to almost nothing. Well, a familiar, gravel-rough voice rasped out of the fog, sending a jolt of recognition through every member of Team 7 at once. "Looks like the copy ninja is still standing." "I was almost disappointed," Zabuza, Kakashi said, stepping smoothly in front of his students, one hand already drifting toward his forehead protector. "You're healed faster than I expected." "Had good motivation," Zabuza's voice answered, closer now, though his shape remained frustratingly indistinct in the churning mist. "And I brought motivation of my own this time." A second presence made itself known a moment later, quieter, more controlled, materializing out of the fog with the same economical grace Naruto remembered from the forest clearing 3 days earlier. Haku stepped into view a short distance behind Zabuza, Saban already loose and ready between his fingers, expression schooled into something calm and unreadable. Naruto's stomach dropped straight through the bridge's wooden planking. "Haku?" he said before he could stop himself, disbelief cracking through his voice. Something flickered across Haku's carefully composed face, there and gone almost too fast to catch, but Naruto caught it anyway. Regret. Genuine, unguarded regret. "You two know each other?" Sasuke asked sharply, glancing between them. "We met," Haku said quietly, before Naruto could answer. "I didn't lie to you in the forest, Naruto. I simply didn't tell you everything." A pause, something heavy and reluctant settling into the words that followed. "I'm sorry it has to be this way." "You're the masked kid," Naruto said slowly, pieces clicking together with sick, dawning clarity. The Sanban, the mention of someone important Haku traveled with, the strange, sad warning about kinder circumstances that Naruto had brushed off as nothing at the time. From that first fight. "You're the one who helped Zabuza escape." "I am," Haku confirmed, no attempt at denial in it. "And I intend to help him again today." Cute reunion, Zabuza cut in, impatience sharpening his rough voice. "But we're not here to catch up. Kakashi, same terms as before. You, me, unfinished business. Haku will handle your students." His visible eye, the only feature clearly discernible through the swirling mist, settled with unmistakable weight on Naruto. Especially the interesting one. Kakashi's stance shifted, weight settling low and ready, forehead protector already pushed up to reveal the crimson spin of the Sharingan. "Sasuke, Sakura, Naruto, protect Tazuna. Stay together. Whatever happens, don't fight this alone." "Copy that, sensei," Sasuke said. "Kunai already drawn?" The mist thickened further, and Kakashi vanished into it after Zabuza, the two of them disappearing entirely from view within seconds. The only evidence of the fight now the distant clash of steel, and the occasional shudder of killing intent rolling through the fog like distant thunder. That left 3 genin, one increasingly nervous bridge builder, and Haku, standing quiet and still in the mist, Saban glinting faintly in the low light, waiting. "I don't want to fight you," Naruto said, and he meant it with every ounce of the same blunt honesty that had made their forest conversation feel so easy just days before. "You're not. I don't think you're actually a bad person. I could tell that when we talked." Something in Haku's expression cracked, just slightly, real pain showing through the careful composure for one unguarded second. "I don't want this either," he said quietly, "but Zabuza-sama needs this bridge to fail, and I made a promise to protect his path, whatever it costs me." His grip tightened on the Sanban. "I am truly sorry, Naruto. I meant every word I said to you in the forest. That doesn't change what I have to do now." "Then let us change your mind," Sasuke said sharply, stepping up beside Naruto, dark eyes hard and focused. "Because we're not backing down either." Haku's expression settled back into calm, unreadable resolve. "Then I suppose we understand each other." The Sanban flew almost too fast to track. If you've followed a fight scene or two on this channel, you know Haku's reputation didn't come from nowhere. What followed was less a battle and more a demonstration of speed that neither Sasuke nor Naruto had ever faced from an opponent close to their own age. Saban flashing from every angle, ice needles spinning up out of hastily formed jutsu that neither genin had time to properly identify before they were already dodging the next volley. Sasuke matched him blow for blow at first, his own reflexes sharp enough to deflect or evade most of the opening exchange, dark eyes tracking Haku's movements with the kind of focus that made Sakura, standing protectively in front of Tazuna a short distance away, kunai grip tight and shaking hands, hold her breath with cautious hope. But Haku wasn't fighting at full strength yet, and everyone in that fog could feel it building. "Secret art, demonic mirroring ice crystals," Haku said quietly, and the temperature around them dropped sharply as thin sheets of ice began rising up out of the mist-slicked bridge planking, curving upward and inward in a rapid, elegant lattice until they formed a complete dome. Dozens of mirror-smooth ice panels enclosing Sasuke entirely, each one catching and holding a faint, ghostly reflection. "Sasuke!" Naruto shouted, lunging forward, only to be forced back by a sudden barrage of Sanban materializing from every angle at once. not thrown, he realized with growing horror, but launched from within the mirrors themselves, Haku's reflection flickering between panel after panel too fast to track. Inside the dome, Sasuke spun and deflected what he could, but the sheer volume of the assault was staggering, Saban raining in from every direction simultaneously, no way to guard every angle at once, no way to tell which reflection held the real Haku and which were nothing but light and ice. This technique, Haku's voice echoed from all around the dome at once, quiet, almost apologetic, allows me to move between each mirror as though they were doorways. I am faster within this space than almost anyone. I truly am sorry, Sasuke, but I need this fight over quickly. Sasuke gritted his teeth, taking a shallow cut across one arm as he twisted away from a strike that would have caught him square in the shoulder otherwise, blood beading dark against pale skin. Faster doesn't mean unbeatable, he snarled, activating the fledgling Tsutomu Sharingan burning to life in both eyes, tracking the blur of movement with newfound clarity even through the chaos. Outside the dome, Naruto slammed both fists against the smooth ice, searching desperately for any weakness, any seam, while Sakura stood guard over Tazuna, eyes wide with helpless fear. "Naruto, do something!" she shouted. "I'm trying!" Naruto shouted back, chakra already surging hot and desperate beneath his ribs, that familiar, ancient warmth clawing to answer the fear building in his chest, but this time, without the raw, overwhelming panic of near death driving it, it refused to fully manifest, flickering weakly along his forearms and dissolving before it could take real shape. "Come on," Naruto thought desperately, pounding uselessly against ice that didn't so much as crack. "Come on, I need you now." Inside the dome, Sasuke's Sharingan bought him a few precious extra fractions of a second, enough to track the pattern of Haku's movement between mirrors, enough to start predicting rather than merely reacting, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. Haku's speed, honed over years of brutal, dedicated training, still outpaced even a freshly awakened Sharingan working through its first real battle, and the Senbon kept coming, faster and faster, precise strikes aimed to wound and disable rather than kill outright, each one drawing another shallow line of blood across Sasuke's arms and shoulders. "Why are you holding back?" Sasuke gasped out between exchanges, deflecting another volley with a kunai that was rapidly accumulating notches along its edge. "You could have ended this already." "Because I don't want to kill you," Haku's voice answered quietly from somewhere in the shifting reflections. "I've killed before, when it was necessary. I don't relish it, whatever Zabuza-sama might believe. If there's another way to end this, if you and your friends simply withdraw from this fight, I would prefer that outcome to any other." "That's not," Sasuke bit off a hiss of pain as a Saban grazed his cheek, close enough to draw a thin line of blood along his jaw. "That's not how this works. We don't run." "I was afraid you'd say that," Haku said, something genuinely regretful threading through the words, and the pace of the assault sharpened once more. Outside, Naruto's fists were bleeding now, knuckles split from pounding uselessly against unyielding ice, chakra still refusing to fully answer his call, flickering and dying every time he reached for it. "It's not working!" he shouted, frustration and fear tangling together in his voice. "Why isn't it working?" "Because you're panicking, not protecting," Kakashi's voice cut through unexpectedly from somewhere nearby in the fog, close enough that Naruto realized, with a start, his sensei must have circled back momentarily, even as the sounds of his own clash with Zabuza continued echoing from deeper in the mist. "Naruto, breathe. Find the feeling, not the fear. You already know how." The voice vanished again almost as quickly as it had appeared, swallowed back into the mist as Kakashi returned to his own desperate fight, and Naruto forced himself, with everything he had, to slow down, to stop pounding blindly against the ice, to close his eyes, even with Sasuke's muffled grunts of pain audible from inside the dome, even with every instinct screaming at him to just hit harder. Not fear, Naruto thought, forcing his breathing to steady, reaching past the sharp, ugly edge of panic toward that deeper, steadier thing beneath it. The same stubborn certainty he'd found in the training clearing 3 days ago. "Sasuke's my friend. My rival. I'm not gonna let him get carved up in there because I couldn't get my act together. I don't want to lose anyone. Not today. Not ever, if I can help it." The warmth beneath his ribs answered this time, not explosive, not desperate, but steady, rising with clear, focused intention. His eyes snapped open, gold-white light already gathering along both forearms. Inside the dome, Sasuke had taken a particularly vicious hit to the leg, staggering, one knee buckling against the ice floor as another volley of Senbon converged from 3 separate mirrors at once, too many angles to fully block. Naruto didn't think. He simply moved. The chains erupted from his back with a force that cracked the wooden planking beneath his feet, no longer the small, controlled extensions he'd been practicing in the training clearing, but something larger, hungrier, answering the full weight of real desperation the way they had that very first day against the water clone. Except this time, Naruto's eyes were open, his focus clear, and instead of lashing out wildly, he drove every ounce of that raw power into a single, concentrated strike aimed directly at the dome's nearest mirror panel. The impact rang out like a struck bell across the entire bridge. The ice didn't shatter completely. Haku's technique was too well crafted, too dense, for a single strike to bring the whole structure down. But the panel Naruto struck split from top to bottom with a sound like breaking glass, spiderwebbing fractures racing outward across its surface. And for one crucial instant, the mirror's reflective surface flickered and dimmed, unable to hold Haku's image steady. Inside the dome, Haku staggered, the disruption in his technique's flow costing him a precious half-second of balance, and Sasuke, Sharingan tracking the opening with desperate precision, seized the moment, and drove a kunai in a shallow, glancing strike across Haku's exposed arm, drawing the first real blood of the fight to land against him. Haku retreated instantly, putting distance between himself and both genin, breathing harder now. One hand pressed briefly to the shallow cut along his forearm before the reflexive control reasserted itself, and his expression smoothed back into careful neutrality. That's... Haku's gaze flicked toward the cracked mirror panel, toward Naruto standing outside the dome with chains still hanging in the charged air around him, dissolving slowly, chest heaving with the effort of the strike. That's the same technique from the forest. But stronger. Far stronger than what you showed me then. Yeah, well, Naruto said, breathing hard but grinning fiercely despite the blood still trickling from his split knuckles, guess I had a better reason this time. Something in Haku's carefully composed expression cracked open again. Not fear, exactly, but a complicated, painful recognition. The look of someone watching a private conviction reflected back at them in the middle of a fight they desperately didn't want to be having. You truly believe that, don't you? Haku said quietly. That strength only really means something when it's protecting someone. I don't just believe it, Naruto said, chains still humming faintly beneath his skin, ready to answer again the moment he called. I just proved it. Come on, Haku, you don't have to keep doing this. There's gotta be another way. For one long, suspended moment, something in Haku's stance wavered, genuine, visible hesitation, the Senbon in his hand lowering fractionally as he stared at Naruto across the cracked, fractured dome, torn between years of hard-earned loyalty and the strange, unwelcome ache of finding real conviction staring back at him from an enemy he'd been ordered to eliminate. But then, from somewhere deeper in the mist, a sound rose up that cut through the moment entirely, the heavy, distant clash of Kakashi and Zabuza's fight sharpening suddenly into something more desperate, more dangerous, followed by Zabuza's rough voice snarling out something Naruto couldn't quite make out over the distance. Haku's expression hardened back into resolve, the moment of hesitation swallowed and buried beneath duty once more. I'm sorry, Haku said quietly, Senbon lifting again, the fractured mirror panel beginning to knit itself slowly back together with a fresh pulse of chakra. I truly am. But I can't stop yet. Not while Zabuza-sama still needs me. Then I guess we're not done either, Naruto said, planting his feet, chains gathering once more along both forearms, steadier now, more controlled than they'd ever been. Sasuke. You good? I've had worse, Sasuke called back from inside the dome, wiping a thin line of blood from his jaw, Sharingan still spinning bright and focused despite the cuts scattered across his arms. Took you long enough. Hey, I was working on it. Naruto shot back, some of the old, easy banter slipping back and even in the middle of the fight, and for just a moment, something loosened slightly in the tense, mist-heavy air around them. Haku raised both hands, and the cracked mirror finished sealing itself shut, the dome once more complete and whole, Senbon already gathering in the air around every reflective panel. Then let's finish this properly, Haku said quietly, and the assault began again, faster now, more urgent, both sides fully committed. The fractured piece of the forest clearing 3 days ago burned away entirely by the harder, unforgiving math of the fight neither of them had wanted, but neither of them was willing to walk away from either. Outside the dome, Sakura kept her kunai raised, standing firm over Tazuna despite her own fear, watching Naruto brace himself for another strike, watching the gold-white shimmer of chains gathering once more along his arms with an expression caught somewhere between awe and terror. And deeper in the mist, unseen by any of them, the fight between Kakashi and Zabuza had just taken a turn none of them were prepared for, one that was about to change the entire. The second wave of Saban came faster than the first. Naruto planted his feet against the cracked planking of the bridge, chains already gathering along both forearms and twin ribbons of gold-white light, and this time, instead of waiting for an opening, he pushed forward, driving straight at the dome with both chains extended, aiming for the same fractured panel he'd struck before. "You're targeting the same weak point," Haku's voice observed from within the shifting reflections, quiet but strained now. The effort of maintaining the technique clearly beginning to cost something even for someone with his reputation. "That's clever. Ice mends fastest where it's already whole. A fresh fracture in the same location takes longer to seal properly. Figured that out myself, actually," Naruto shot back, gritting his teeth as the chain slammed home again, the same panel splitting wider this time, spiderweb cracks racing further across its surface before the ice could fully knit itself shut. Inside the dome, Sasuke seized the renewed instability without hesitation, Sharingan tracking the flicker and dim of Haku's reflection as it struggled to hold steady across the weakened mirror. He drove forward, kunai flashing, and this time his strike landed clean across Haku's shoulder, shallow, but real, drawing a fresh line of blood through the pink fabric of his sleeve. Haku staggered back with a soft, pained exhale, putting distance between himself and both genin, breathing harder now, sweat beading along his hairline despite the cold mist clinging to the bridge. "You're both improving faster than I anticipated," Haku admitted, voice quieter than before. "I may have underestimated you." "Yeah, well, people do that a lot," Naruto said, chains retracting slowly back into his forearms, chest heaving with effort but grinning fiercely despite the exhaustion pulling at every muscle. "Kinda used to it by now." But something had shifted in the fight, and everyone in that dome could feel it. Whatever suppressive quality lived inside Naruto's chains, it wasn't just knocking Haku's ice constructs around, it was actively unraveling the chakra holding them together, forcing Haku to spend more and more of his own reserves just to keep the dome intact, let alone maintain the blistering pace of his earlier assault. Haku seemed to realize this at almost the same moment Naruto did. "That technique doesn't simply strike what it touches," Haku said slowly, dark eyes narrowing with the particular focus of someone recalculating an entire strategy mid-fight. "It disrupts the chakra itself. That's not merely destructive. That's corrosive, to a technique like mine." "Cool, glad you noticed," Naruto said, chains already reforming along his arms, steadier and faster to summon now that he'd found the rhythm of it under real pressure. "'Cause I'm not stopping." He drove forward again, and this time he didn't aim for a single panel. He swept both chains wide in a broad arc, dragging them across 3 separate mirrors in quick succession. Each one shuddered under the strike, cracks spreading, Haku's carefully maintained reflection flickering and destabilizing across the whole structure at once rather than just the one point of impact. Sasuke, watching the pattern with his awakening Sharingan, understood the opening the instant it appeared. Naruto, again, same spot, now. Naruto didn't need telling twice. He funneled everything he had left into one final, concentrated strike against the weakest of the 3 cracked panels, and this time the ice didn't just split, it shattered outright, an entire section of the dome collapsing into glittering fragments that hissed and melted rapidly against the warm chakra still humming off Naruto's chains. The dome, no longer a complete, unbroken structure, lost its terrible, seamless cohesion all at once. The remaining mirrors flickered, Haku's ability to flow seamlessly between them stuttering, and for one crucial, unguarded moment, Haku himself was forced to plant both feet on solid ground rather than vanish into another reflection, exposed, breathing hard, Saban still gripped tight but no longer moving with that impossible, untraceable speed. Sasuke didn't waste the opening. He closed the distance in a heartbeat, kunai flashing toward Haku's exposed side, a strike that, at full speed, in a real fight to the death, would have ended things then and there. Haku twisted at the last possible instant, avoiding a fatal wound but taking the blade shallow across his ribs instead, a sharp gasp of pain escaping him as he stumbled back against the splintered remains of his own technique. Enough, Naruto said, stepping up beside Sasuke, chains still gathered and ready along both forearms, though something in his voice had gone quieter now, less fierce and more genuinely pleading. Haku. Please, you don't have to keep going. We don't want to kill you. I already told you that. Haku pressed a hand against the shallow wound at his ribs, blood seeping thin and dark between his fingers, breathing hard, dark eyes flicking between the two genin standing united in front of him, the remains of his shattered technique melting slowly into puddles around all three of their feet. For a long, suspended moment, nobody moved. I believe you, Haku said finally, quietly, and something in the careful composure that had carried him through the entire fight finally, visibly cracked. I believed you in the forest too, when you spoke about strength and the people it's meant to protect. I think some part of me has believed you this whole time. Then stop, Naruto said, chains still humming but no longer advancing, some instinct telling him this moment mattered more than pressing whatever advantage he'd just won. Please, whatever Zabuza's got you doing, there's another way. There's always another way. Something in Haku's expression twisted with real, raw pain, torn between two loyalties that had never once, in all the years since Zabuza found him, been forced to collide quite this directly. You don't understand what he means to me, Haku said, voice unsteady now in a way it hadn't been through the entire fight. He gave me purpose when I had nothing, when the whole world had already decided I was better off dead. I can't just... He didn't get to finish the sentence. From somewhere deeper in the mist, a sound cut across the bridge that stopped every single person present cold, not the familiar clash of Kakashi and Zabuza's ongoing duel, but something else entirely. The heavy, rhythmic thud of a great many footsteps, moving fast, moving deliberately, accompanied by the low murmur of dozens of unfamiliar voices and the unmistakable metallic clatter of drawn weapons. Haku's head snapped toward the sound, every trace of the raw vulnerability from a moment before vanishing instantly beneath a sharper, more alarmed focus. That's not Zabuza-sama's chakra, he said quickly. That's... The mist ahead thinned just enough to reveal the source, and what stepped out of it made even Naruto's blood run cold. A small army of mercenaries, easily 30, maybe 40 strong, armed with a chaotic mismatch of swords, clubs, and crude improvised weapons, came pouring onto the bridge from the far shore, led by a short, squat figure in an expensive coat far too fine for the company he kept, walking with the smug, unhurried confidence of a man who never once had to fight his own battles. Gato, Tazuna spat from where Sakura still stood guard over him, the old bridge builder's voice thick with a hatred that had clearly been building for months. That coward! I should have known he wouldn't just let Zabuza handle this alone. Gato surveyed the scene on the bridge with an expression of bored, contemptuous amusement, hardly sparing a glance for the genin, or the shattered remains of Haku's ice technique melting around them. Quite the mess you've made out here, he said, voice reedy and smug. Good thing I brought a cleanup crew. What is this? Haku demanded, straightening despite the wound at his ribs, Saban lifting again on pure reflex even as confusion and dawning alarm warred across his face. Zabuza-sama's arrangement was with you directly. This wasn't part of the plan. Plans change, Gato said with an indifferent shrug, gesturing lazily toward the mercenary force spreading out across the bridge behind him. Truth is, paying a missing Nin's fee was always going to cost more than I wanted to spend, once the bridge builder and his little ninja escorts were dead anyway. Much cheaper to let my men finish the job and skip Zabuza's invoice entirely. His thin lips curled into something unpleasant. No hard feelings. Business is business. Something in Haku's expression went very still, the particular, dangerous stillness of a person recalculating an entire understanding of their situation in the space of a single sentence. You intend to betray Zabuza-sama, Haku said slowly, disbelief and rising fury threading through the careful, controlled words. After everything he's done for you. Betray is such an ugly word, Gato said, waving a dismissive hand. I prefer efficient. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some loose ends to tie up. He turned toward his mercenary force, voice rising into an order. Kill the ninja. Kill the old man. Kill anyone else who gets in the way. I don't care how messy it gets. The mercenaries surged forward with a ragged roar, and for one chaotic moment, the entire bridge dissolved into noise and motion, Sakura pulling Tazuna further back with a sharp cry of alarm, Sasuke pivoting to meet the nearest wave of attackers with kunai already flashing, and Naruto, chains still humming faintly along both forearms, caught for one disorienting second between the enemy he'd just been fighting and the much larger, much more chaotic threat now bearing down on all of them at once. Haku moved first, not toward Naruto or Sasuke, but toward the mercenary line itself, Saban flying in a precise, devastating arc that dropped 3 men before any of them fully registered he'd moved. Haku, what? Naruto started, genuinely startled. Zabuza-sama doesn't know yet, Haku said grimly, already moving to intercept a second wave of attackers, eyes Saban reforming rapidly in each hand despite the wounds still bleeding at his side. He's going to need warning, and he's going to need this bridge cleared of Gado's men before he can even think about finishing his own fight. Dark eyes flicked briefly toward Naruto, something complicated and urgent passing behind them. Our fight isn't over. But it can wait. This can't. Guess we're on the same side for a minute then, Naruto said, chains snapping taut along both forearms once more, some of the old fierce grin returning despite the chaos exploding around them. Weird day. Very, Haku agreed, and then there wasn't time for anything else, because the first wave of mercenaries was already on top of them. What followed was less a coordinated battle and more a churning, desperate scramble, Sasuke cutting down attacker after attacker with brutal, efficient precision, his Sharingan tracking every incoming blade with cold, practiced clarity, Sakura standing firm over Tazuna despite her own fear, driving back anyone who got close with sharp, controlled strikes that surprised even her with how steady her hands had become, and Naruto, chains lashing out in wide, sweeping arcs, sending mercenaries flying without a single lethal blow, some old, stubborn part of him still refusing to cross the line into outright killing even in the middle of an ambush this chaotic. Beside him, moving with a speed and precision that made it clear exactly why Zabuza valued him so highly, Haku fought with lethal, economical grace, Saban finding vital points with unerring accuracy, ice constructs rising and falling around him in a blur of motion that left mercenary after mercenary sprawled unconscious or worse across the splintered bridge planking. You're not holding back with them, Naruto observed between exchanges, ducking beneath a wild sword swing before driving a chain hard into the attacker's midsection, sending him sprawling. They're not you, Haku said simply, spinning to intercept another 2 attackers at once, Saban flashing. And Gado just tried to have Zabuza-sama killed. I find myself considerably less inclined toward restraint at the moment. Naruto couldn't really argue with that logic, all things considered. The tide of the fight began to turn steadily in their favor. Gato's mercenaries, for all their numbers, were mostly opportunistic thugs rather than trained shinobi, and against the Sharingan user, a kunoichi in training with steadier nerves than she'd ever given herself credit for, an Uzumaki with chains that could send grown men flying with a single strike, and a genuinely lethal ice user fighting with the full weight of betrayed loyalty behind every strike. The mercenary line began to fracture and scatter within minutes rather than the hours Gado had clearly expected this to take. Then, from deeper in the mist, a new sound cut through the chaos. Zabuza's voice, rougher and more strained than before, rising in unmistakable fury. Gado. The single word carried across the entire bridge with enough raw menace that even the remaining mercenaries flinched, several of them abandoning the fight outright and bolting back toward the shore they'd come from. Haku's head snapped toward the sound, something fierce and relieved flashing across his face. He knows, he said. Zabuza-sama knows. The mist parted, and Zabuza emerged at last, blade still gripped in one hand, blood streaking one side of his bandaged face. Whether his own or Kakashi's, Naruto couldn't immediately tell, but his shark-flat eyes had fixed with terrible, absolute focus on the small, squat figure of Gado, who had gone very pale indeed at the sight of his supposedly contracted killer bearing down on him with murder written plainly across every line of his massive frame. You hired me to kill a bridge builder, Zabuza said, voice low and dangerous, each word deliberate. Then you decided my fee wasn't worth paying, and sent an army to finish the job behind my back while I was still bleeding from a fight you knew I hadn't finished. He rolled his shoulders, blade lifting. That's the kind of mistake a man only gets to make once. And now, let's not be hasty, Gato stammered, backing away rapidly, his earlier smugness evaporating entirely as his remaining mercenaries began fleeing in earnest around him, no longer willing to stand between an enraged S-rank missing Nin and the man who just tried to have him killed. We can renegotiate, surely there's... Zabuza didn't let him finish. What happened next unfolded fast enough that Naruto barely had time to process it. A single, brutal strike that ended Gato's threats, his schemes, and his tyranny over the land of waves all in the same motion. The tycoon's body crumpling to the bridge planking as his last few remaining mercenaries scattered in every direction, abandoning any pretense of continuing the fight. Silence fell over the bridge in the aftermath, broken only by the distant, retreating footsteps of fleeing mercenaries and the soft, steady drip of blood from a dozen different wounds scattered across every person still standing. Zabuza turned slowly, breathing hard, blade lowering fractionally as his shark-flat eyes swept across the scene, Kakashi standing a short distance behind him, visibly exhausted but upright, Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura grouped protectively around Tazuna, and Haku, standing closer to the genin than to Zabuza himself, blood still seeping slow from the wound at his ribs. Haku, Zabuza said, something rough and complicated in the single word. Report. Gato intended to betray you from the start, Haku said steadily, though there was a visible unsteadiness beneath the composed words now, exhaustion and blood loss finally beginning to catch up with him. I fought alongside them, a small, tilted gesture toward the genin, to hold his men off until you could deal with him directly. Zabuza's gaze shifted toward Naruto and the others, something unreadable working behind those flat, dangerous eyes. You fought with the enemy. I fought against the man who tried to have you killed, Haku corrected quietly. There's a difference, Zabuza-sama. For a long, tense moment, nobody moved, the entire bridge holding its breath as Zabuza studied his young companion with an expression that gave away nothing at all. Then, slowly, something in the massive man's shoulders loosened, just slightly, not forgiveness exactly, but something closer to grim, exhausted acknowledgement. Fine judgment call, for once, Zabuza said gruffly, and though it wasn't quite gratitude, it was close enough that Haku's shoulders sagged with visible relief. Kakashi stepped forward cautiously, hand still hovering near his forehead protector, visible eye moving warily between Zabuza and the scattered, retreating remains of Gato's mercenary force. It seems, he said carefully, that our contract situation has changed rather significantly. Zabuza huffed something that might, in a better mood, have been a laugh. Contract's dead along with the man who wrote it, he said, glancing down at Gato's crumpled body with something like grim satisfaction. No employer left to answer to. No bounty on you, or the old man, or your brats. His shark eyes settled once more on Naruto, something calculating and thoughtful working behind them now that the immediate threat had passed. Guess that leaves us in an interesting position, doesn't it? Naruto, still catching his breath, chains dissolved now into nothing but faint, lingering warmth beneath his skin, looked between Zabuza's unreadable expression and Haku's exhausted, relieved one, and felt something in his chest loosen slightly for the first time since the mist had rolled in that morning. So, does that mean we're not fighting anymore? He asked, with the same blunt directness that had colored every conversation he'd had in Wave so far. Zabuza's gaze lingered on him a moment longer, something dry and almost amused flickering across the scarred, bandaged face. Guess that depends on what happens next, kid, he said. But for now, I think we've all had enough bloodshed for one afternoon. Behind him, the mist was finally beginning to thin, sunlight breaking weakly through the gray clouds overhead for the first time in days, illuminating a bridge scattered with the debris of a battle that had started as an assassination attempt and ended, somehow, as something far stranger and far more uncertain than anyone had expected when the fog first rolled in that morning. But even with the immediate danger past, Naruto couldn't shake the feeling that this strange, fragile peace was only the calm settling in after one storm, with a much bigger question about to blow in right behind it. Because a man like Zabuza Momochi didn't just walk away from a battlefield without deciding, one way or another, exactly what to do about the boy standing in front of him with chains buried in his blood and no idea yet what that inheritance was going to cost him.